I flew 18 hours to get to my sister's wedding, 18 hours of flights, layovers, and driving. I had signed every contract for that wedding. $21,000 worth of vendor agreements had my name on them. I showed up in the dress I had bought 3 months earlier, and my mother looked me in the eye at the venue door and said, "You were not invited. Leave." 3 days later, she called asking me to pay $12,000, and what I said next made her gasp. Before I get into what happened, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from right now. I want to know how far this story travels. And if you have ever shown up for someone who would not even save you a seat, hit that like button because this one is going to hit close to home. Subscribe if you are new here because the story I am about to tell you does not end where you think it does. Now let me take you back to where this all started. My name is Ginevra. I am 27 years old and I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I grew up in Meridian, Idaho in a house where the rules were simple even if nobody ever said them out loud. Helena, my younger sister by 4 years, was the one who stayed. She stayed in Idaho, stayed close to my parents, stayed in the orbit of everything my mother, Diane, cared about. I left at 19 for college and never moved back. That distance became the explanation for everything. Anytime I was left out of something, anytime I missed information, anytime I showed up and felt like a guest in my own family, the answer was always the same. You live so far away. You are busy. We did not want to bother you. I told myself that was reasonable. People get busy. Families drift when geography gets in the way. I made my peace with it because the alternative, which was admitting that the distance was not just physical, was something I was not ready to sit with. Helena got engaged to Garrett Caldwell in the spring. Garrett is the only son of a family that runs an agricultural business with a solid reputation in the Treasure Valley area of Idaho. When Helena called to tell me, she was excited and I was genuinely happy for her. I sent flowers to her apartment the next day. I texted my parents to congratulate everyone. I meant all of it. The call I did not expect came 4 days later. It was my mother, Diane. She did not open with excitement about the engagement. She opened with logistics. She explained that the Caldwell family expected a proper wedding. Formal venue, professional vendors, a guest count of over 100 people. She said the Caldwells were contributing a portion, but the rest was on our family to cover. My father, Ronald, had been recovering from back surgery and was not working at full capacity. Their savings were not going to stretch far enough. She said they needed someone with a stable income and a solid credit history to sign the vendor contracts. She said it like it was straightforward. She said, "You are the oldest. This is what family does." The total across all the vendor contracts was $21,000. The agreement was structured in 2 payments. The first was $9,000, which covered the deposit requirements to lock in the venue, the catering company, the photography and videography studio, the floral design company, and the car service for the wedding party. That first payment would come out of the family's savings and be transferred into my account so I could forward it to the vendors. The second payment of $12,000 was the remaining balance, due to the vendors within 7 days after the wedding date. Diane said she would have that money ready and would transfer it to me before the deadline. I asked her one question before I agreed. I said, "And I will be there at the wedding, right? I am part of this." She said, "Of course, you are family." I signed every contract. I drove to a UPS store and sent the signed paperwork by overnight mail to 2 vendors who required original signatures. I set up a folder on my computer and saved every confirmation email, every contract copy, every invoice. I built a tracking spreadsheet with vendor names, contact information, payment amounts, and deadlines. I did this because I am organized and because I wanted to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. Over the following weeks, I made sure the first payment transfers went smoothly. I forwarded the funds to each vendor the same day they arrived in my account. I sent confirmation receipts to Diane. I kept the paper trail clean. I also started planning my own trip. Round-trip airfare from Salt Lake City to Boise came to $340. I booked a hotel room near the venue for 2 nights at $160 total. I bought a dress in navy blue that cost just under $200. I scheduled a hair appointment at a salon near my hotel for the morning of the wedding. I went to Helena's registry and selected a gift valued at $200 and had it shipped to her apartment in Boise. By the time I was done, I had spent close to $800 of my own money, on top of everything I had already managed with the contracts. I was ready, I was going. The first sign came about 2 months after I signed the contracts. I had texted Diane asking whether the floral designer had confirmed the centerpiece color palette, because I had received an email from Petals and Company asking for a final decision. Diane replied and said the decision had already been made in the group. I wrote back asking what group she meant. She said there was a group chat on iMessage called Helena's Big Day. She said it had her, my Aunt Lorraine, and some of Helena's friends in it. She said she had not added me because I was busy with work and she did not want to overwhelm me. I did not push back. I told myself it was fine. Brides in a circle, her friends, her mother handling the day-to-day details. I was the logistics person. Maybe that was just the role I was playing in this. The second sign came 6 weeks before the wedding. I had not received a formal invitation in the mail. I texted Helena directly and asked about it. She said the invitations had gone out already and that mine had probably gotten lost in the mail. She did not offer to resend the information. She did not forward me a digital copy with the ceremony time and any specific instructions for guests. I found the venue address by pulling it from one of the vendor contracts I had signed. The third sign came 1 week before the wedding. I called Diane to ask about the rehearsal dinner, which was scheduled for the evening before the ceremony. It was the gathering where both families would meet, where the wedding party would run through the logistics of the next day, where everyone connected in person before the main event. I told her I wanted to know the time and location so I could plan my arrival from the hotel. Diane said the rehearsal dinner was just immediate family and the Caldwells. She said it was small and there was no need for me to be there. I said I am immediate family, Mom. She said, you know what I mean, do not make it complicated. I was not invited to the rehearsal dinner. Looking back now, those 3 things lined up in a way that should have told me something clear. I was not in the communication group, I did not get a formal invitation. I was excluded from the family gathering the night before, but at the time I kept finding explanations that let me stay comfortable. The group chat was for the people on the ground in Idaho. The invitation got lost. The rehearsal dinner was small. I was reaching from a distance and those things happen. 5 days before the wedding, I called my uncle Maddox. He is my mother's younger brother and the one person in that family I have always been able to talk to without translating myself first. I told him about the group chat, the missing invitation, and the rehearsal dinner. I told him it probably meant nothing, but something about it was sitting wrong with me. Maddox went quiet for a moment. Then he said, Ginny, I do not know exactly what is going on over there, but pay attention when you get there, just pay attention. I asked him what he meant by that. He said, I mean what I said, pay attention. I did not ask him to explain further. I finished packing my bag and booked a 6 a.m. flight. My flight out of Salt Lake City was delayed 45 minutes on the ground before we even pushed back from the gate. We connected through Denver and that leg was smooth, but by the time I landed in Boise, collected my bag and picked up the rental car, it was 9:50 in the morning. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 11. The venue, Ashgrove Estate, was on the east side of Boise, about 20 minutes from the airport. I had enough time. I drove directly there. I parked in the designated guest lot and walked toward the entrance to the ceremony area. I was wearing the navy dress. My hair was done. I had the gift envelope in my hand and my bag over my shoulder. There were other guests arriving around me, people I did not recognize, people walking in pairs and small groups toward the entrance. That is when Diane stepped out from a side door. She was wearing a deep red dress and her hair was pinned up. She looked put together. She looked like she had been inside for a while already. When she saw me, her expression did not change the way a mother's face changes when she sees a child she has not seen in months. She walked toward me and stopped close enough that I could hear her without her having to raise her voice. She said, "You cannot come in." I said, "What?" She said, "This is family only. You were not on the guest list, you need to leave." I looked around. There were people nearby, 6 or 7 of them standing in small clusters. I recognized 2 of the faces from photos I had seen on Helena's social media. They were Caldwells, they were watching. I said, "Mom, I am Helena's sister." Diane lowered her voice but did not soften it. She said, "I do not know why you came, you were not invited, please do not make a scene here." A woman stepped out from the group of Caldwells and walked over. She was older, composed, and she addressed Diane directly. She said, "Is everything all right? Who is this?" Diane turned to her and smiled. The shift was immediate. She said, "She is a distant relative. There was some confusion about the invitation. She is going to head out now." The woman nodded, said something polite, and went back inside. I stood there for another few seconds. I looked at Diane. She looked back at me and did not say anything else. She just waited. I turned around, I walked back to the rental car, I put the gift envelope on the passenger seat. I sat there for a long time without starting the engine. I did not call anyone, I did not text, I just sat. Then I drove back to the hotel. That night I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my email on my laptop. I pulled up the folder with every vendor contract. I opened them one by one and read through the payment authorization sections. In each contract, my role was listed as authorized payment representative. That was the specific language, authorized payment representative. The person responsible for submitting the remaining balance of $12,000 within 7 days of the event date. I read that phrase in 5 separate documents. Then I looked at the contact information fields in each contract. Every one of them listed Helena Voss as the event holder, the person who had placed the order, the person on whose behalf the event was being organized. I closed the laptop. I did not make any calls that night. I thought about what Maddox had said, pay attention. I had paid attention. Now I needed to decide what to do with what I had seen. I woke up at 6:45 a.m. I made coffee from the hotel room machine and sat at the small table by the window. I opened my laptop and pulled up the vendor folder again. I had slept on it and nothing had changed. I was listed as the authorized payment representative for $12,000 that was due within 7 days. I had been told to leave. I had been called a distant relative. Those two things could not both be true at the same time. The first call I made was to Maddox. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what had happened at the venue. I told him about Diane stepping out, what she said, and what she told the woman from the Caldwell family. I told him about the label she used, distant relative. Maddox did not say anything for a moment. Then he asked me one question. He said, "What do you want to do about it, Ginny?" I said, "I want to make sure I am not financially responsible for a wedding where I was not considered family enough to walk through the door." He said, "Then do what you need to do, I am with you." I thanked him and hung up. I spent the next 40 minutes going through each contract carefully. The authorization language gave me a clear path. As the authorized payment representative, I could contact each vendor, verify my identity, and notify them that I was withdrawing my payment authorization. I was not cancelling the contracts. The contracts were between Helena as the event holder and the vendors. I was only the payment middleman. Removing myself from that role meant the vendors would need to collect the remaining balance directly from the event holder. I called Ridgeline Catering first. I identified myself, gave them my authorization code from the contract, and told them I was withdrawing my payment authorization for the remaining balance. The person I spoke with was a man named Owen. He confirmed the change, noted that the outstanding balance would be redirected to the event holder on file, and said they would send a formal invoice to Helena Voss within 24 hours. I called Clearwater Visuals next, the photography and videography studio. Same process. I identified myself, withdrew my authorization, and confirmed that the remaining balance would go to the event holder. They confirmed and said their billing team would reach out directly. I called Petals & Company, the floral design vendor. Same notification, same result. The outstanding balance would be invoiced to Helena Voss. The band had been paid in full during the first payment round. There was no remaining balance with them. I called Boise Classic Rides, the car service. There was a smaller amount still outstanding for the extended service window they had added 2 weeks before the wedding. I withdrew my authorization, and they confirmed the balance would go to the event holder. By 9:30 a.m. I had made all 4 calls. I had not cancelled a single contract. Every vendor still had a valid agreement. Every vendor now had a direct billing relationship with Helena Voss, the person whose name was on the event order from the beginning. I closed my laptop, packed my bag and checked out of the hotel. I returned the rental car and went through security. On the flight back to Salt Lake City, I did not read anything. I did not put headphones on. I looked out the window and felt something settle in my chest that had not been there the day before. I did not text Diane, I did not call Helena, I did not send any kind of explanation to anyone, I just went home. 3 days passed. My phone was quiet from that direction. No one called to check whether I had gotten home safely. No one texted to ask why I had left. The silence from my family was complete, and in those 3 days I went to work, cooked my own meals, and slept without interruption for the first time in weeks. On the 3rd day my phone rang. It was Diane. She did not ask how I was. She said the vendors had been contacting Helena, and that the remaining balance of $12,000 had not been paid. She said that since I had signed the contracts, the responsibility was mine. She said one of the vendors was already talking about sending the account to collections if they did not receive a response that week. She asked me when I was going to take care of it. I let her finish, then I said, "When am I going to take care of it?" She repeated herself. She said I had signed the contracts and that made me responsible. I said, "Mom, you told me I was not invited. You told me I was a distant relative. You stood at that door and sent me away, so I went home. And before I left Boise, I called every vendor and removed my payment authorization. The invoices go to Helena now. That is not my responsibility anymore." There was silence, then I heard her take a short, sharp breath. Then she said loudly, "You cannot do that, you signed those contracts." I said I removed my authorization as payment representative. I did not cancel anything. Helena's name is on every event order as the holder. The vendors have her contact information. If you want to talk through this further, Helena is the right person to call. Then I ended the calls. Within the next 2 hours, my phone showed 4 missed calls from Diane, 2 from my father Ronald, 3 text messages from Helena, and 1 missed call from my Aunt Lorraine. I did not answer any of them. I read Helena's messages. She said I had ruined her wedding week. She said the vendors were going to hurt her credit score. She told me to call them back and fix it. I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to what I had been doing. The only call I returned that evening was from Maddox. He said he had heard from Diane. He asked if I was holding up. I told him I was fine. He asked if there was anything I needed him to do. I told him there was one thing. I told him the Caldwell family deserved to know the truth about what had happened. They had watched Diane turn me away at the door. They had heard her call me a distant relative. They did not know that the person she said those things to had signed every single contract that made their son's wedding possible. Maddox said he would handle it. He called Warren Caldwell directly. Maddox and Warren had crossed paths enough times in the Treasure Valley community that the call was not out of nowhere. Maddox told Warren what had happened from the beginning. He explained that Ginevra had signed the vendor contracts at Diane's request. He explained that Ginevra had arrived at the venue and been turned away. He explained what Diane had said to Patricia at the door. He told Warren all of it clearly without exaggeration. Warren listened to everything without interrupting. When Maddox finished, Warren said, "Thank you for telling me." That same evening, Warren told Patricia what he had learned. Patricia remembered the moment at the venue door. She remembered Diane's smile and the words she had used. Distant relative. She had accepted that at face value because she had no reason not to. Now she had a different picture. Patricia went to Garrett with what she knew. She asked him directly whether he had been aware that Helena's sister had signed the vendor contracts. Garrett said no. He said Helena had never mentioned Ginevra in the context of the wedding planning at all. He went to Helena that night and asked her the same question. Helena confirmed that Ginevra had signed the contracts. She described it as Ginevra just handling some paperwork. Garrett asked why Ginevra had not been at the wedding. Helena said their family had a complicated dynamic and it was better that way. Garrett asked who had decided it was better that way. Helena did not give him a clear answer. Garrett did not raise his voice. He did not storm out. He sat with it quietly. But from that point the tone between him and Helena shifted and Helena felt it. Warren and Patricia called a family meeting with Garrett the following day. They had already committed to funding the honeymoon trip to Hawaii, 2 weeks at a resort on Maui, approximately $8,000. Warren told Garrett they were putting that commitment on hold. He said they needed to understand more about how decisions had been made before they extended additional financial support. He said it without cruelty, but he said it clearly. The honeymoon trip did not happen as planned. Meanwhile, the vendors were not waiting. Ridgeline Catering sent a formal invoice to Helena within 24 hours of my call, exactly as Owen had told me they would. The invoice listed the outstanding balance and a payment deadline. Clearwater Visuals sent a follow-up email 2 days later with a late fee notice attached. Petals and Company called the phone number listed under Helena's contact information in the contract and left a voicemail. Diane called Ridgeline and tried to explain that there had been a misunderstanding. The billing coordinator at Ridgeline told her that the account had been updated per the authorized representative's instructions and that the invoice was now in Helena's name. Diane asked for an extension. Ridgeline said the account was already past the initial grace window and an extension was not available. Diane called me 3 more times over the following 4 days. I did not answer. She left one voicemail. She said the family was working on getting the money together and that she needed more time and that she hoped I would reconsider. I saved the voicemail and did not call back. Helena and Diane had to pull together $12,000 in 10 days. Ronald withdrew money from a retirement savings account. Helena borrowed a portion from a close friend. They paid every vendor in full before the collections deadline. The 2-week honeymoon in Maui did not happen. Helena and Garrett took a 5-day trip instead, scaled back because the finances after the vendor payoff left very little margin. In the community where my family lived, things shifted in a way Diane had not expected. My Aunt Lorraine, who had been in the inner circle of wedding planning from the beginning, told a few women from her church group that there had been drama involving Diane's older daughter at the wedding. She framed it as Ginevra causing problems, but one of the women she told that to was someone who knew Patricia Caldwell personally. That woman mentioned what she had heard to Patricia. Patricia told her what she had actually witnessed and what Maddox had told Warren. The version that circulated after that was not Lorraine's version. About 3 weeks after the wedding, Diane called me again. This time the tone was different. She did not lead with a demand. She said she thought we needed to talk about what had happened. I said we could talk, but I needed her to hear me first. I told her that I had signed those contracts because I believed her when she said I was family. I told her that being called a distant relative in front of people I had never met, by my own mother at my own sister's wedding, was not something I was able to set aside. I told her I did not need an apology to go on living my life, but I told her that if she wanted a relationship with me going forward, it was going to look different than it had before. Different in a specific way. I told her there would be no more situations where I carried a financial obligation for this family while being treated as optional. I told her that any family gathering I was expected to participate in would be one where I was invited and included the same way Helena was. I told her if those terms were not something she could commit to, I would be maintaining more distance, and I would be fine with that. She was quiet for a long time, then she said, I did not think it would go this far. I said, I know, that is the problem. I did not close the door completely, but I did not leave it wide open either. I set the terms and I meant them. 6 weeks after the wedding, I was called into my manager's office at work. I had been managing a project that had outperformed the original targets significantly, and the company had decided to recognize that. I received a promotion with a 14% salary increase and a new title that came with oversight of a small team. I signed the new offer letter that afternoon. I texted Maddox to tell him. He sent back 3 words, I knew it. I did not tell Diane. I did not tell Helena. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I realized I no longer needed them to know about my wins in order for the wins to matter. A month after the wedding, I started seeing a therapist in Salt Lake City. Not because I was in crisis. I went because I wanted to understand why I had looked at 3 clear warning signs over several months and kept finding reasons to explain them away. I wanted to know what had made it easier to keep the peace than to trust what I was seeing. In our second session, my therapist asked me what I had been hoping for when I signed those contracts. I said I had been hoping that doing something significant for the family would make me feel like I actually belonged in it. She asked me how long I had been trying to earn that feeling. I sat with that question for a long time before I answered. 3 months after the wedding, I got a call from a number I did not immediately recognize. When I answered, the woman on the other end introduced herself as Patricia Caldwell. She said she had gotten my number from Maddox. She said she wanted to properly introduce herself, and she said she would like me to come to a small dinner the Caldwells were hosting for their extended family and close connections. She said it was a tradition they kept, a welcome gathering for new family members, usually held a few months after a wedding once everything had settled. She said she knew we had not been properly introduced, and she wanted to change that. I said yes. I drove to their home in Boise on a Saturday afternoon in late fall. The gathering was about 20 people. It was warm and easy, the kind of gathering where people ask genuine questions and actually listen to the answers. Warren shook my hand and said he was glad I had come. Patricia introduced me to 3 different people as Helena's older sister. She used those exact words each time. Helena's older sister. Helena was there. She was seated at the far end of the table during dinner. I did not seek her out and she did not come to me. At one point I looked up and she was looking at me from across the room. I held her gaze for a moment, then looked back at the conversation I was in. Diane was not at that dinner. She had not been invited. I drove home that evening with the radio on low and the windows cracked. I had gone into that family's home as myself, without proving anything to anyone, and I had been welcomed in a way that cost me nothing and asked nothing of me except to show up. If you have ever been the person who handled everything, signed everything, organized everything, and still ended up standing outside the door when it mattered, I want you to know that what happened to me is not unusual. A lot of people have been in a version of that situation. And if this story reached something in you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever done something significant for a family member and been left out anyway? What did you do about it? I read every comment, and your experience matters here. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Hit the like button so more people can find it. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one, because I have them, and I am not done telling them. To everyone who watched all the way through, thank you for being here. I hope you go into your week knowing that you do not have to keep signing contracts for people who would not even hold a door open for you. You do not earn belonging. Either you belong or you find where you do.